So this week we're on lesson 2, which is chapter 1, and we're really just focusing on the first 12 verses, right? And last week we did an overview of the entire book, just to get a general feeling of what James is talking about. What are our first impressions of the book? Anybody have any remembrance of anything that stood out to them last week about anything in this entire book? Okay, well, that's fine, because we're going to work through it. Okay. Let me just ask you this. Who did James write the book to?
12 tribes. 12 tribes, the 12 tribes are dispersed abroad.
Brother.
Yeah, and where? Yeah, they're dispersed abroad. So they've been scattered. Okay, so that kind of leads into the next few verses, 2 through 4. And I want to ask you, what are these verses about, 2 through 4? What's the subject? What's the topic he's discussing there, 2 through 4?
Talking about trials, being
Right,
having
trials.
your faith tested.
Yeah, faith tested. But in these trials, why do you think James started this book with that subject?
Well, here we go. Dwell to the people in the dispersion.
Yeah. So think about where they are and what they might be facing. Okay, so he's talking about trials. So let's talk about, what does he tell us about trials? What is the thing that strikes you about what he says, first of all, about trials in verse 2?
Consider it all joy, for do heaven trials.
Is that the first thing you want to hear when you're in a trial? Consider it all joy. Consider it all joy. So
somebody just said some of the best challenges and mistakes have been the best memories.
Oh, yeah.
Memories. Like if it just went smoothly, you wouldn't have known. So I think this thing about don't look at your trials like devastating. Look at them for what God wants to bring to you. Joy.
Joy, yeah. And we're going to unpack that a little bit, Sue. Like, what does he say about trials? Considered all joy when you meet trials of various kinds.
Yeah. Now,
we did some definitions of some words here on page 9 and 10. So we looked up what does it mean, a trial? What does it mean, testing? What does it mean to be steadfast? So we want to take those definitions and put it back into the text and see how it helps us understand when he says, count it all joy. What is this trial? So what was the definition you found about a trial? How do you describe it?
I've got a test of faith.
Okay, it's a test of your faith. How does that, how can you broaden that definition from what you looked up?
one of the definitions for me was putting something to the proof, proving something, and adversity, but also trial that has a beneficial purpose, that it's divinely permitted or sin.
Mm-hmm. So you're trying to understand that trial in the context of proving something, understanding it, proving if it's genuine. And what is it that is being proven here? What is the trial proving? What is the testing about?
And verse 3 says it's testing of your faith.
Okay, testing of your faith. So if testing is proving something to be genuine, then what is it saying about your faith in a trial?
The title says faith that is real.
Okay. So that you're proving that your faith is real in the trial. I wrote down something here. I got to find it. Oh yeah.
It
So I had
also,
some notes that said a trial is a difficult situation that brings a reaction through which the character of believers is demonstrated. So when you're in a trial and you have a reaction to that trial, what is that showing people about your faith?
genuineness and depth.
Okay, the genuineness, the depth of it. What does it say that trials, it says it's a testing of your faith, and it produces what?
Steadfastness.
Steadfastness. Okay, what does this steadfastness mean? What's the definition of that?
I love this word.
Okay,
Perseverance.
Yeah, endurance.
endurance,
Unwavering.
unwavering. Anybody have the Greek word for it?
Yeah. Oh, I didn't write it down. But it's number 5278.
It's hupomeno,
Oh, yes. Under, coming under.
right? Coming under, staying under that trial, just enduring it, being steadfast in it, being persevering through that trial. Because if you do that, what does it say? Steadfastness. What does steadfastness produce? In verse 4. Okay, verse 3. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, which is perseverance, endurance, right? That's what you've all said. And let steadfastness have what?
Have its full effect,
So that what?
that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing.
Okay, so let's talk about these words, perfect and complete. What were the definitions you found about that?
Perfect could mean mature,
Mm-hmm.
becoming full grown.
Having reached its end, come to the completion.
Mhm.
Without fault.
Without fault.
What was that, Ron?
Without fault.
Without fault. Okay. So let's put,
Full grown was there too.
what was that, Sue?
Full grown.
Full grown, full grown. Okay. So let's put that back into this context. You're in a trial. You're in a trial. And the trial is a testing of your faith. It proves your faith. Staying in the trial, persevering through it, brings about this completeness. Completeness. Do you guys feel like you're perfect when you say that word perfect? Do you feel like you're perfect?
No.
But no, not at all. But the trial, so what part does the trial play in this completeness?
It helps to give you chops for moving on.
Give you chops for moving on. Yeah, good.
Okay, before I fully knew the Lord, or just when I first knew the Lord, this would have really blown me, but I've come through this. I've stuck with it.
Mhm.
And he's making himself more complete in me.
Okay, I like that you said making himself more complete. Okay, look at the cross references you looked at on page 10 from Ephesians and Philippians. How does this help us understand a little bit more this perfection or completeness?
I missed that. Somebody better have an answer.
Okay, Ephesians 4:13.
Can do all things.
What page are you on, Linda?
On page 10. Four 13 talks about equipping the saints so that the body of Christ is built up to a maturity, to the fullness of Christ. Anybody have Philippians?
Is that like where he says, again, out here that you, I don't know.
When he talks about he has not become perfect, but he presses on. Presses on. So both of those verses, they indicate a process. A process. And then this, so in trials, becoming complete, lacking in nothing is a process. And how does that trial affect you in your growth process? Anybody's ever had a trial you can remember and you came through it, and what was your response?
Joy.
Joy. Joy. Why joy?
Because God got me through it.
Okay. And what did that do to your faith when you came through that trial?
Helps me to remember when I go through another trial.
Mm-hmm. So you're stronger.
Mm-hmm.
Many times I've heard people say when they come out of it, my faith is so much stronger for having been through this, which is the exact thing. It says it's the testing of your faith, the testing of your faith. It's a process. This becoming complete is a process. So how does that affect our view of trials?
Maybe willing to not run away from them, or to see them in a different light.
Do you think a trial is sent to you to destroy you?
Sometimes I do.
In the middle of it, I'm sure you do. But if it's a testing of your faith,
Yeah.
is it meant to destroy you?
Oh, definitely not.
Yeah,
Oh,
definitely
it's meant to
not.
strengthen you. Yeah.
Right. You look at that process. It's about you staying in it, producing steadfastness, bringing you to a place of maturity, of lacking in nothing, being complete. And those trials are meant to help do that. So, count it all joy. Look at some, on page 11, some cross-references about rejoicing in trials. Page 11, Romans, and 1 Peter. What do we learn about trials that helps us understand what James is saying?
For the first one with Romans, I just wrote, it shows like the goodness of our trials and suffering.
Good. Again, there's a process, isn't there, Seth? It's like tribulations bring perseverance, brings in, proven character, lacking nothing. What does it say about what you're supposed to do in those trials there in Romans 5?
Oh, we are to
Your attitude.
rejoice.
Rejoice,
Yeah.
exactly, rejoice. What about First Peter?
Same
think
thing,
it's-
rejoice.
And the genuineness. I mean, I think in this verse, you think about people you know that have really been through something, and there's just sometimes like a real honesty and genuineness and in their experience that is, very real and palpable.
And everything is pointing to production. Like it produces endurance, it produces steadfastness, it produces joy, it produces genuineness. Like it is like it's pushing you towards all of those things. But it, like, you might have this, you might have patience, you might have faith, but it's producing a greater abundance of that.
Yeah. What else do we learn in First Peter about trials? Either from chapter 1 or chapter 4.
We shouldn't be surprised by it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that in these 3 verses, it does keep going back to Christ. You're doing this with Christ, or Christ is being revealed, or God's love is being poured out. You know, that's the benefit to us and to others.
What does First Peter 1, 6-9 say is the outcome of your faith?
Bring honor and glory in the last days.
Mm-hmm.
Christ is revealed.
The outcome of your faith is, and ultimately is salvation, proof of your salvation. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So think again, why does everybody in here say we should rejoice in trials? What does it prove?
That our faith is real.
Yeah, your faith is real. Okay, so you're in a trial and people see that your faith is real. Does that bring you joy?
That's because then you know that your hope of salvation that will be the outcome, and that is real, and that's what we can have real joy in.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think for me too, it also proves to me that that it's not just a theory.
Okay, it's not just a theory.
I think also it glorifies God, because like other people might see how you're like reacting to it, and they'll learn more about God's character through you.
Absolutely. So next time you're in a trial, what are you going to think about? How will you approach it?
Maybe that's why they want us to memorize this verse.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Right. But if it helps to understand what your attitude should be, why you should have the attitude of joy. Then when you're in a trial and you can have that attitude of joy, knowing that it's proving your faith, knowing that it is proving that you have salvation, that you are bringing glory to God. So it's all about knowing why should we rejoice? Because there's nothing but positive results then in the end for us, the proof of your faith. Good. Look at verses 5-8. 5-8. We want to talk about how did these verses relate to verses 2-4 about being in a trial. How do they relate?
Both of
Well,
them
faith,
talk about having faith.
yeah, faith ties them together, right?
Yeah.
What is he saying in verse 5? If any of you lacks what?
Wisdom.
Wisdom. Okay, if you lack wisdom, then what are you supposed to do?
Ask God.
Okay, it's very clear there.
Ask
Ask God
in faith. Yep.
in faith. So we're gonna unpack that a little bit too. So if you lack wisdom, in what situation? What have we just talked about? Where are they?
In your trials.
In your trials, okay? We're not talking about a new subject here. We're talking about, we're still in the midst of trials. One of the things that's important to look at, and in your homework, it asked you, I think it was around day 5, about in verse 2 and verse 12, you see the words trial and steadfastness in 2, and you see trial and steadfastness in 12. And it's important to follow the key words. Trials is a key word. Steadfastness is a key word. So it goes from 2 to 12. It's kind of like beginning and end. The subject, the topic is trials. All of that is about trials. It's not a new topic about wisdom in general. It's asking, you're in a trial, and so if you're lacking wisdom in that trial, which makes a lot of sense, right? You're in a trial and I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. So what do? You ask God, and what does it say he will do?
Give generously.
Yeah, he gives generously. Look at your cross references about that on page 12. It also says he gives generously without reproach, which is a good thing. You're in a trial, I don't know what to do. You ask God, what do I do in this trial? What do the cross references show us about God and his giving to us?
He doesn't say he's going to give it and then not have it to give. He's got it in the bank.
He's got it, okay? He's got it.
And it reminds us too of where we are in the situation. You know, we don't have it, and God is the one that has the power, and we need to realize that because we're sometimes, when I go through a trial, I try to solve everything on my own, and it's not in my power, it's in God's power. That I just need to remember that.
Good point. Heather, that's basically what this is saying, isn't it? Just if you don't know, if you lack wisdom in the trial, then you just go to God because he's the one who has the wisdom. And says he will give it to you. He will give it to you. I think we've all been in that situation in a trial. It's like, I just don't know what to do. And like Heather said, you try to figure it out yourself, or sometimes you go ask someone else. But it's a good reminder that God is the one who has the wisdom and understanding, and he's willing to give it to you generously without reproach. But as Ron was saying before, what's the condition for you asking God for wisdom in a trial?
You have to ask in faith and without doubt.
Okay, ask in faith and without doubt. What do we learn about that faith in the cross references on page 13, in Hebrews and Matthew and Mark?
Well, in Hebrews, it kind of said to me that we have to believe that he exists and that he's able to reward.
yeah, so that's critical. You believe that he exists and he is able to reward, and you ask in faith, believing that. Which is contrasting to what we're going to see with the doubting and the double-minded man. Anybody else, anything else to say from those cross references? Like Matthew or Mark?
You have to ask. Like Matthew says, he'll give to those who ask.
Does that line up with what we see in James? If you ask, and he will give it to you.
Oh, yeah. Let him ask.
Yeah, ask. And just ask. Keep asking. Keep seeking. And that will get you through the trial.
Well, and I think that's an important thing because God already knows. He knows what our needs are. But this is not, I mean, it's like participation is required. Like he needs to know that we're in it, that there's like, I don't know, like we're not entitled to it. That is, we're not just going to assume that he's going to take care of it, that we need to participate.
Mm-hmm. And again, remembering what this trial is a testing of your faith. And faith is, how's faith described in Hebrews 11?
Assurance and conviction of what isn't seen.
Of what is not seen. So, and when you're in a trial, do you clearly see? Do you clearly see through the trial? No, you just have to have faith. To have faith, like Courtney was saying, you have to participate in that and ask, even though you can't see. You can't see. What about? Was somebody going to say something? Okay. Contrast that with what he says next. You have to ask in faith with no doubting. What does it mean to doubt?
Sometimes I think it means that you can pray about it and sometimes hope for the best but plan for the worst, like just in the back of your head going, yeah, I know God can take care of it, but he probably won't. Because of whatever reason, fill in the blank. And sometimes like in our humanness, we just kind of go there. And in a sense, it's doubting.
Doubting, in this case, it's said that the doubting is in the present tense, so it's a continual state of doubting. So.
It felt like an ongoing attitude. And one of the definitions I looked up, it says it's not so much a weakness of faith, but a lack of it. So it's this ongoing, really not believing.
Right.
Actually not believing it, which is different from doubts that you can have, like, ooh, how can he do this? Or I don't know how, but it's this definition is one that's more like you really are lacking faith. Is that what did I pick that up right?
No, I think you did. And it goes back to the other verse that you were talking about, believing that God is and that he answers. And so if you have a lack of faith, then you're not believing that God is. You're not believing it.
This isn't beating me up for going, I don't know how this works. That kind of
right.
It's like it's an ongoing attitude and an ongoing practice of not believing God's capacity.
So when he talks about asking in faith and not, without doubting, because it says, for the one who doubts is like what? What's the comparison here in this verse, in verse 6? He's describing a man who doubts, this man who's doubting. See the comparison, that word like?
A wave that is tossed about.
A wave tossed about, driven and tossed by the wind. Okay, is that a picture of faith? What does that say about this man's faith?
It's not rooted.
Yeah, not rooted. Not rooted. So in the middle of a trial, the doubting is just going to cause him to be tossed about like a wave. In verse 8, what does it call him?
Ooh.
Ooh. How does it describe him?
Unstable.
Unstable in all his ways. How else is he described there?
And double-minded.
Double-minded. What does it mean? What does that mean, double-minded?
Was that he's easily influenced by what others say? So like what you say, gee, that makes sense. What someone else says, that makes sense. He's accepting everything and doesn't have, like the foundation to stand on.
It's like instead of having those roots, you're just some things you'll be faithful in, other things maybe not so much, and it's not a stable basis of faith.
So if we go back to the trial and your faith is being tested, what does that say about his faith?
It is not genuine.
Yeah. Not genuine. Not genuine. So if you're going to ask for wisdom,
He doesn't see it as a joy.
what's that?
He doesn't see it as a joy.
Yeah, right. Not seeing it as a joy for sure. But if you're going to ask God for wisdom from that position of doubting, what can you expect to receive?
Well, you can expect, but you're not going to get it.
Okay. It says that person will receive anything. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. So then how do we ask? Going back to verse 6.
In faith.
In faith. In faith. We ask in faith because that's our foundation. And
So I
then,
kind of think that comment there, he says, in faith with no doubting, that seems to me to be like saying the same thing twice, sort of. I mean, if there's doubt, is there really faith? That's the question that has to be asked personally.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like what Heather was saying about sometimes you ask and you think, well, okay, I'll ask, but I'm not sure if God's going to do it. That's a hard one, really, when you think about it. Because I think a lot of times we're in that position like Heather. It's like, well, I'll ask, but I'm not sure I'm asking with 100% confidence that it's going to happen. But it says that if you lack wisdom in a trial, ask God who has that wisdom and who gives generously. So knowing that he has it and knowing that he gives generously should help us to ask more in faith without doubting. A double-minded man.
So, Linda, the thing about this, I think that came through to me is because it is an ongoing mindset. It isn't just that, like seriously that I have to keep asking God. And there are trials where it just is so frightening and I get my eyes off for a moment or something like that. But it's this mindset of not trusting. It's an ongoing doubting. It's an ongoing, like, I do not trust this guy, God. Right? It's ongoing. And I cannot, not you, I can't expect to have God help me grow unless I really have faith in him and trust. And then he's glad. If I will do that, he's glad to help me. Right? It's the ongoing piece that got to me this week.
Yeah. Because it's a process. This testing of your faith that leads you to completeness is a process. And so it's this ongoing process. And so when you come through a trial, then that strengthens your faith for the next time. And that helps you to grow just a little bit more. Like Paul said, I keep pressing on, ongoing, pressing on in my faith. Knowing that it proves that your faith is genuine. And like Stephanie said, it's like other people see it. So it brings God glory. Understanding the big picture of a trial, is critical, because we're supposed to count it all joy because it proves our salvation, which is the most important thing. So if the trial proves your salvation, proves that you have that faith that leads to salvation, then yeah, that's joyful. We want to take a look at the last few verses, 9 through 12, and understand how they connect with 1 through 8, because we're still in the context of trials. You see that? Still in the context of trials. So in 9 through 12, who are we talking about? In 9, who are we talking about?
Well, the lowly brother, who I assume is someone that doesn't have faith.
Huh.
Okay, so we have the lowly brother in 9, and then we have who in 10?
The rich.
The rich. Okay.
Are we still talking about this 12 tribes in dispersion?
Yes.
Talking to
Yeah, he's still talking to the 12 tribes. He's still talking to Jewish believers.
Linda, can you hear us?
yes.
Who's speaking?
Okay, now. Okay.
Okay.
Or
Yes. Oh, Jeannie and Mary. Okay. So we have the lowly brother, or a brother in humble circumstances. He is to boast in what?
exaltation.
His exaltation. Okay? Whereas you have the rich man in his, what's the word for humiliation? So you have exaltation and you have humiliation. So the man of humble circumstances is brought high. The rich man is brought low. Is that what that's saying? We're talking again about trials. So is it a trial for a man of humble circumstances or lowly circumstances? Is it a trial for him? If you have nothing,
I feel like a person who doesn't have anything doesn't have much to lean on but God. And that's why, the Bible refers a lot to like easier for a rich man or a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. Like that's what I think of. And so I think those who have more feel like they can rely on their own resources rather than the one who really provides. So I feel like I'm just kindly disagreeing with Ron. I feel like the lowly brother is the one who's more rich because he is exalting in his faith. I don't know. That's just how I see it.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering if the author was, for the first time, I was wondering if the author was saying, don't keep doing it just about who has riches and who doesn't, but it's more than this.
Okay, let's look at the rich man a little bit. Go ahead, Ron.
So I think, I think 10 in the first half of 11, it applies to the lowly brother. And the rich, then he comes back to it the last half of 11. I think he's saying that neither one of them are in very good shape here.
And that if you make it just about that, then you're missing what
that's
about. Yeah. Trial isn't just that either you're rich or you're poor.
Right.
That was at least some of mine.
Okay, let's go to verse 11, because he describes the rich man. In verse 10, the rich in his humiliation, because like a flower of the grass, he will pass away. For the sun rises with its scorching heat and withers the grass, its flower falls and its beauty perishes. And it says, so also is the rich man. When it says so also, that's a comparison. So this is like this. So if you have the description of a flower that because of the heat falls and its beauty perishes, it says so also will the rich man fade away in what? In the midst of what?
His pursuits.
His pursuits. Okay, so if he's going after riches, if that's what he's going after, then what will become of him? Fade away. He's going
I think, but I think we're giving the pass to the lowly brother. Who is? I think what you have to define is who is he in verse 10. And I think it's both of them.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree too.
The lowly brother boasts in his exaltation. So he's being exalted. So that's a key word here. What's happening with the lowly brother of a humble situation? He's being exalted. Maybe
that's
the
not necessarily. I don't think that's necessarily a good thing, though. That's not. We think of it as a good thing, but I don't think there's anything in the scripture that backs that up.
Okay, let's look at. I want to look at another cross-reference. We'll see what you're talking about there, Ron. See if this helps. And that would be in Corinthians. Let me find it.
That in 1 Corinthians 1, 26 to 31?
Yeah,
we had the reference?
That's it.
It says basically says boast only in the Lord.
Find this. Because it talks about being called.
It says that no human being can boast in the presence of God. And that I thought they were talking to both the lowly and the rich. You can see advantages both ways, and God is going to produce through trials some of these things in you. But I was almost thinking he was saying, get off all these comparisons about where you are financially.
Okay.
Or,
what did we see about rich and poor in Acts on page 15? And the set of cross references.
I didn't agree.
They shared everything.
Okay, so we have evidence that there were rich and poor among the believers, right?
Yes.
Okay. And the rich, what did they do?
Gave.
At this early stage in church, they were sharing everything completely. But I I beg to differ with some of the writing of the rest of the, like Paul saying, members of the household of.
Yeah. So these are scattered Jews, but we do know that there was rich and poor among the believers, right? And so there was the need for people to be helped out, the ones of lowly circumstances here, the lowly brother. 1 Corinthians, let's just look at 1 Corinthians a little bit. What does it say about what God chooses? What does God choose? He chooses the lowly things of the world.
Chooses like the opposite. Like he chose what is foolish to shame the wise, chose the weak to shame the strong.
So basically, he's choosing the lowly to show the rich. He's choosing the weak to show the strong. So he's raising up people of lesser resources to be the ones who witness, to show the rich people, to show the strong people that it's not about their strength or their riches. So one thing, if you have, let's just go back to that rich and poor again. If you have nothing, but yet you have your faith, then what do you have? If you have nothing of physical means, but you have your faith.
Well, really, you have everything then.
Exactly. And that's demonstrated a lot in third world countries. You see the joy coming from people who have nothing, but they have their faith. So that's being raised up. You can still rejoice in that. Okay, and what about the rich man? If he continues his pursuits of riches, then what will he have?
A big bank account.
Yeah, he will have nothing. He will fade away. But if he realizes that and humbles himself, if God brings him down and he humbles himself, then what does he have?
It's everything.
Everything. It's a complicated couple of verses, but again, it's in the context of trials. And then how does verse 12 sum it all up? Blessed is the man who what?
Remain steadfast under trial.
Under trials. Because what? What does it say? When he has stood the what?
Test.
The test. Where did we see that before?
In verse 3.
In verse 3, trial is a testing of your faith. When he has remained steadfast under trial, when he has stood the test, what will he receive? What will he receive after that, withstanding the test of his faith?
Crown of life, which God has promised.
Mm-hmm. The crown of life, which God has promised. So there again, you have this whole idea of how do I approach trials? If I understand the outcome, then I can have joy in the midst of that trial. You have to understand the outcome of the trial to have the right attitude. Anyone have any trials that they have been through that they want to share? How any of this would apply to that? Okay, well, we know when a trial is facing us, what will our attitude be? Where will we go for wisdom? And I would ask you, like, what about, you know, someone who's in a trial? How can you be of assistance to that person who is going through a trial?
I think to join with that friend to just remind ourselves about what we know about God. And I think sometimes that's very helpful to me, to have my friends who can remind me about what I know to be true and join supporting me in that.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about today. It's like knowing that God has the wisdom and wants to give it. So that's where we go and ask in faith and to understand how to get through a trial. And that's the thing that we can share with people that we know who are going through trials. To just remind them of that. And that it is a testing of their faith, and that the outcome is joy, is the crown of life that God has promised. And it's proving that your faith, it's showing your character, it's showing your belief in God, showing that you trust Him to handle this, to get you through, to bring you more to completeness, to lacking in nothing. A process. It's a process. So rejoice in trials. Rejoice always, knowing that the outcome is your salvation. Trials. Next week, we're going to talk about temptation. Temptation. Isn't that exciting? Yeah, yeah. So next week, we'll be talking about the rest of chapter 1 and finish out this chapter of James. But again, you know, that whole first part of it is about trials and what we do in the midst of trials. So don't be tempted this week in anything, and we'll meet you back same place, same time next week. Okay, be safe.